Okay, so last week I did this video around looking at some of the captures from the curated list that NeuroDSP does. And I got a question about why I wasn't, on the captures I didn't like, making more adjustments and seeing if I could get the capture to sound better. And the main reason for that is, based on my understanding of how captures work, you have, I think, limited control over how the capture sounds. The capture is a point-in-time capture of a pedal or an amp in a cabinet or whatever. So in my mind, if it doesn't sound right at everything at 12 o'clock, I'm not going to get into tweaking it. To me, the tweaks you do on a capture are more kind of fine-grained stuff, just to get a little bit more output, a little more gain and things like that. But it got me thinking, how much can we actually control how a capture sounds from the controls that they give us? So I wanted to play around with that today and see how kind of drastically different we can get a capture to sound based on the controls that we have of it. So I want to start off by kind of talking a little bit about, generally, how does a capture work? And so I kind of created this diagram, and this is for a capture that's kind of the ones we're looking at today that are amps and cabs included. Obviously, this is slightly different if you're doing a pedal or just an amp that's kind of DI or whatever. But generally, if you look at this, in the middle, we've got our kind of the capture in here. And the capture is, again, capturing a moment in time. And it's really what it does is it relates kind of an input signal to an output signal. And it's giving it different volumes and frequencies and things like that to learn how whatever's in between responds. But that's what it's doing. It's mapping input to output. That's what a capture is. It's a translation algorithm, so to speak. So if you've got an amp and cab, what it's capturing is, you've got the signal, it goes into the amp, that goes into a cab, that's being mic'd, that's going through some kind of mic preamp, maybe even a compressor, whatever else the recording person might be doing, and then there's an output. And the quad cortex doesn't really know what's in the middle of this. All it knows is it sends a signal in and it gets a signal back, and it's creating the algorithm for what that transformation looks like. But all these settings are in here in terms of the amp gain, the amp EQ, the amp outputs, where the mic is placed, what cabinet you're using, what speakers it has in it, what preamp you're using. All of that is immutable. You can't change it. Once it's captured, it's captured. So outside of that, they do give you some amount of control on the capture block, which is what this kind of dotted line box is around the outside. We have an input gain that goes before the capture. We have a bass, mid, and treble, which I believe is a post EQ. If we look at the manual here, it doesn't really tell you whether the bass, mid, and treble controls really are before or after the capture. I'm assuming that they're after, that it's a post EQ setting, but I could be wrong on that because I can't really get a definitive answer on it. But if we go back, let's assume it's a post. So you do have some post control on the EQ, bass, mid, and treble. And then you have an output volume, and then it goes out of the block. So we don't have a lot of control over what's in this capture box, but we do have some ability to tweak it. And what I wanted to do today is talk about how far can we take this? How much control can we get on this capture? So let's go back to our Cortex control. And the capture I've got selected right now is the Studio Tone Crunch. And if I play that just out of the box, you can see I've got the gain at 12 o'clock, the bass and mid treble are both at even, and then the volume is pushed because it's a kind of a quiet capture. But if I just play that straight up, and I'm using a Strat style guitar today, you can hear there's a little bit of breakup there, but not a lot. So let's start off by talking about what we can do with this gain control. Again, this gain is a pre-gain before it goes into the capture. So if we push that gain, it should be akin to putting a kind of a volume boost pedal in front of an amp. And so that should be pushing the amp harder. And if the capture is reacting like an amp, we should get more gain. So let's do this. Let's pull the volume back. I'm going to crank this gain all the way up, and we'll see what we get. And when you're messing with the input gain, you got to kind of go in tandem with the output volume so you get your levels right. And you can hear it's really pushing a way more gain than we were getting before. So right there, we have a lot of control over the amount of gain we're getting out of this capture. So we can go from there, which is a good amount of crunch, to, if I pull it, let's say let's do this. I'm going to push the volume and see how low we can get the gain. So you can hear with the input gain, you can drastically change kind of the overdrive characteristics of what you're getting out of this preset. And I've used this before a little bit. Most notably, I used it on some of the 2-Rock ODS captures that I got from Amalgam, that I purchased from Amalgam. Some of the clean settings weren't clean enough for me, and I discovered that I could use this input gain to clean them up and get more of kind of the clean tone I was looking for. So, I mean, this is pretty drastic. I mean, that's pretty clean. If we pull this back and crank the gain all the way, that's a drastic difference. So there's a lot of different gain levels that are available from this one capture. So you're not necessarily beholden to the gain level that's been captured on the amp. I think if you have a good capture that was done by somebody who knows what they're doing, and they're setting the gain at the kind of that edge of breakup tone so you can get some character out of the amp, I think you have a lot of control from the capture in order to get maybe the level of gain that you're looking for. So, I mean, that's really interesting. We can see the gain levels are pretty responsive. Let's play with the EQ a little bit. I want to go to this capture, because this was a capture actually I was a little disappointed with, this 2-Rock Malibu. It didn't have a lot of life to it. And so I want to play around with this a little bit. So first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to pull the gain back just a little bit. And we'll push the volume just a little bit too. So that's pretty good, but it still kind of feels a little lifeless. The EQ just seems it's lacking some clarity. So I'm going to pull back the mids a little bit. Let's pull that back to, say, 4. We'll pull back the bass a little bit too. Let's push the treble a little bit. I mean, that's better. I like it better. It has a little more snap to it. Let's go a little further. So interesting. Let's play around with the gain on this and let's pump up the gain a little bit. So let's pull that back. We'll push the gain. We'll go all the way up, see what we get. Yeah, that's maybe a little too much. So overall, I think there's a lot more tweakability here than I definitely realized. I think one thing I'm noticing is the gain is pretty responsive. You can get a lot of different gain levels out of some of these captures, but as you push the gain more, the capture is kind of folding under a little bit. And I feel like you've got to add a little bit of treble back to compensate. The EQ settings maybe aren't as big a difference as the gain, but still there's a lot of tweakability there to kind of get the shape of the tone that you're looking for. So I'll definitely keep this in mind as I'm moving forward and using captures. Before, like I said, I was just, if the capture wasn't 80, 90% what I wanted, I kind of moved on and didn't even try tweaking it. But now I'm realizing there's a lot more control here over these captures than I realized. So, if you've been trying out some captures before and maybe you weren't super happy with them, I would encourage you to go back and see if you can get them to sound maybe closer to what you're looking for. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful, and thanks for watching.